There's just something so real about being a messy girly. In a way, that's truly female solidarity. It's already August and we're past the peak of summer, but technically it is still summer until the end of September, so I'm gonna roll with this. BRAT Summer has been such a phenomenon ever since Charli XCX released her album. I don't listen to club music, and even I listen to the album and have enjoyed a couple of the songs. I don't know how universal of a theme this will be to my audience, but I constantly get so many memes about it on TikTok. And now I want to put together a book list that I think will encompass BRAT Summer. Will I actually successfully read them before the summer ends? That is debatable. But I would argue that not being punctual is probably being Brat anyway. If you don't know what Brat is, it's basically Charli XCX's new album, which became more of like a cultural thing. Then when Kamala Harris became the new presidential nominee, Charli XCX tweeted Kamala as Brat, and then that became incorporated into Kamala's presidential campaigns, and then that blew up even more. And then it was on the news about it, and I will bring in a news clip that will go over the definition of what being Brat is.
Quote, Brat, you're just that girl who is a little messy and likes to party and maybe says some dumb things sometimes, end quote.
So when I think about books that are similar to BRAT Summer, I'm thinking about like the hot girl books. I'm thinking about protagonists who are messy girlies. It's just like a vibe. So I put together 8 books that I think would be fitting for BRAT Summer. Regardless if you want to get into it or not, it's still new books for you to check out if you haven't heard of them yet. Another way to discover books that may be interesting to you is through today's sponsor, Book of the Month. Their mission is to bring the best new fiction forward. So every month they go through hundreds of book titles and curate 5 to 7 best new releases for you to choose to be delivered to your door. They also curate audiobooks, so you have that as an alternate option if you're not feeling a hardcover this month, and that way you can listen to it on their app. But as you can see, I went with hardcover for mine. So I chose 2 books. One of them is Hera by Jennifer Saint. I also picked The Seventh Veil of Salome because I've read Silvia Moreno Garcia's other book before, Mexican Gothic, which I believe was also a Book of the Month choice. So I wanted to check out this one because it is about a film star, but the real drama is the behind the scenes stuff, and those are the kinds of stories that I like too. But if you want to check out the other books that they picked, you can click on the link in my description below and use my code readwithcindy to get your first box for $9.99. You can skip any month, anytime, and you will not be charged. So thank you to Book of the Month for sponsoring. And now let's get into the BRAT Summer book list. First, I'm going to start off with a book that I have read already, and that is The Guest by Emma Cline. Only because when I think about a book that I've read that has a messy bitch, this book really comes to the top of my mind for that. So this is a 22-year-old woman who doesn't really have a job. She basically just gets by through life by sleeping with men who will provide things for her. You gotta do what you gotta do in this economy. Her latest sugar daddy is this guy who lives in the Hamptons, but he breaks up with her, and the whole book is about her deciding that instead of fucking around somewhere else and trying to find a new sugar daddy, she's gonna try to get him back because she knows by the end of next week he's gonna throw some kind of party, so she wants to show up to that party to get him to take her back. So she just has to like kill time until she gets to the party. And you follow her whole journey just trying to survive by mooching off of other people. And she is just really into self-sabotage. There really isn't any plot to this book. She is just drifting around the city, and she's just motivated by desperation to get back with her sugar daddy, and also has a severe lack of morals. So she doesn't give a fuck about like meeting up with a group of girls and pretending that she was like part of the girl group and tries to like steal their money, or meeting this other dude who she can tell is like falling for her, but she decides to use his feelings anyway so that she can get by because he's rich. I did want the climax to be messier because I really feel like it could have led to this huge explosion, because she really was amping it up to something that could have turned really bad, but the worst possible things that I thought of in my mind didn't actually happen, and I just feel like it would have been juicier if it did happen. But still, it's kind of like a vibe. And then we'll get into other books that I haven't read yet, but when I looked up the synopsis of these books, they seemed like they would fit in within the themes. So the next one is Other People's Clothes. This is a slow burn book about these 2 20-something girls. They're both art students. One of them is this girl who had a best friend in high school who got murdered, and so she just wants to do anything possible to repress that shit and not think about it. The other girl is a rich bitch who's obsessed with pop culture, so basically every TikTok girly that you know, but she wants to be famous, but like in an artsy way. So they're both art students, and they move from New York to Berlin to pursue their art. They rent an apartment from this woman who is this famous author of crime novels, and they're thinking that this is a sublease agreement. But as you progress through the book, they start to believe that someone may be coming into the apartment without them knowing, and this person may actually be watching them. And their theory is that it's the author. And so they're like, ooh, what if instead of reporting the situation or trying to get out of the apartment like normal rational people, we try to become inspiration for this author's new novel instead. They want to be the characters in the upcoming book. So they decide to open a club in an apartment, and so there's booze, there's drugs, there's sex, and then something terrible happens. I don't know what, because I haven't read the book, but I am assuming it might be murder, because I have seen some reviews that compare the characters to be like Amanda Knox. So I just really feel like something messy is gonna happen. And if murder is part of the equation, I mean, how much messier can you really get with that, you know? The next book is gonna be an anthology called Sluts. The title pretty much speaks for itself, but it is a collection of personal essays. Some of them are fiction or memoirs or more experimental works, but all of them follow this theme of trying to express the concept of being a slut and how that impacts our inner and outer lives, how that's part of like our identity, how there's like this two-sided coin between seeing slutness as inspiration or as punishment. It's a lifestyle, it's an aesthetic, it's a philosophy. Like there's so many ways that people have really interpreted sluthood. So some of the topics include polyamory, unionizing sex workers, sex and drugs and rock and roll. It sounds like there's gonna be a lot of variety to the essay, so I'm really interested in this one. Like, am I a slut? No, but as a third-party observer, I would like to analyze sluthood. The next book that I also will not be able to relate to, but might find to be very interesting, is one that's called Sugar Baby. This is about a 21-year-old woman who works as a cleaner while living at home with her very religious mother in the suburbs in Britain. She feels really restricted living with her mom, and as many 20-somethings are, she feels very lost. So she basically blows all of her money going to clubs on the weekend as escapism, which is just a way to distract herself from like the mundane aspects of her daily life. And honestly, that shit is super relatable. That's basically me with, well, actually, you know what? I'm not gonna get into my unhealthy coping mechanisms, but it's not gonna be with clubs. I personally don't do that with clubbing, but I can understand how the hot girlies turn to clubbing for that. Anyway, she gets caught up in being a sex worker, so her life is gonna become even more unstable. Her mom ends up throwing her out of the home because obviously she doesn't approve of the daughter becoming a sex worker. So as a result, the main character moves in with a bunch of other sugar babies in this London flat. And so being around in that kind of environment, she just gets deeper and deeper into this situation. It sounds like we're gonna follow her jumping around from different relationships. And I believe the journey is gonna lead up to some self-discovery. She's also mixed race, so I'm assuming that like race and class will be part of the themes as well. So I'm interested in seeing what happens to this girl. The next book that's on the list is Eileen. This is about another girlie who is going through it. On one hand, she has to be the caretaker of her alcoholic father. On the other hand, she has to work as a secretary at a men's prison. So her life is just seeing a lot of grim shit. She deals with a lot of resentment and self-loathing, and her way of coping with it is by having a lot of perverse fantasies and daydreaming about escaping to a big city. She also copes with shoplifting, stalking one of the prison guards that she has a crush on. Then she meets this new character that comes into the picture who is this very beautiful, cheerful woman. They start to build a friendship together, but then some shit goes down. Again, I don't know what, but it's described as a Hitchcockian twist, and it's mentioned that because she has all this affection for this new girl, it pulls her into being complicit to a crime. So again, I feel like murder or something adjacent to murder is part of this shit, and I want to know the tea of what's gonna happen to this girlie. Like, is she about to be at her workplace permanently, if you know what I mean? I don't know. All right, so a lot of these books are just about slutty, messy bitches, but I want to pivot a little bit and now talk about the next book on the list, which isn't about being a slut for once. Part of the appeal of this album was how vulnerable Charlie was in a lot of the songs, particularly certain songs about loss and grief in her life, especially when it comes to one of her mentors and friends. I think a book fitting for that is Grief is for the People. This is a memoir about the author's love for a friend and mentor. Because the author has collaborated with this person, they just reminisce on the ways that this person has challenged them and comforted them and just pushed them to be the person that they are today. This friend of theirs actually had committed suicide, and so the author turns to friends and philosophy and art in order to grapple with all of the emotions that she's feeling and trying to find answers. And it just sounds like a very poignant book, especially when it comes to grief and loss that's so inevitable for everyone to deal with. So I want to check this out and be able to be a sad bitch with all the other girlies. Another nonfiction book that I find relevant to the theme for Brat is Raving. It's basically a documentation of underground queer and trans rave scenes in secret locations around New York City. So I'm biased here because I live in New York, and I think reading about like the history and little pockets and niche things about the city is so interesting to me, especially when it's something that I'm not really familiar with. Like, I've been raving before, but I'm definitely not as into it as other people are, and I feel like reading this book might help me have a deeper appreciation for the rave scene. The book talks about techno and how that's really Black music, and how raving to techno is an art and a technique where queer and trans bodies can be adept to. So I like that there is this intersectionality in queerness as well. And then the last book that's on this list is Down the Drain, which is a memoir written by Julia Fox. The first song on the Brat album even mentions Julia, and I'm actually someone who is not super familiar with her. Like, I've seen a couple of her TikToks before, but once I started seeing bits and pieces of her memoir, it made me interested in learning more about her, because it sounds like she has been through a lot. She's one of those people who's more like internet famous. Like, she's not really known as an actress or a singer, even though she technically has been in acting roles and singing roles, but she's really more known as an internet hot girl. She also has a very defined aesthetic, which is bleached eyebrows, exaggerated eyeshadow, basically the kind of look that like you could only pull off in New York. I think what intrigues me to read her book is that when you look at her, it does seem like she is the typical privileged rich girl in New York. When I looked up her memoir, it just seems like she's been through a lot. Like, she had parents that had a very tumultuous relationship, and that resulted in her pretty much raising herself. She dated a drug dealing boyfriend who was very abusive and possessive. She's been to jail a couple of times. She's been to a psychiatric hospital. She has been a sex worker before, so she has some stories with some shady sugar daddies that are out there. She used to deal with a heroin addiction that led to her living in trap houses. She had to overcome that addiction when she lost her best friend to overdose. Actually, a lot of friends she's lost to drugs and suicide. So she's just been through a lot of shit. Oh, and also she dated Kanye West for like 2 months, I think. So she's definitely gonna be talking about what that was like there. I have the audiobook on hold because she narrates the audiobook herself, and currently I have to wait like 7 weeks before I can get the audiobook. So I'm definitely not gonna be able to read it before Brat Summer ends, but I'm still interested in checking it out. And I just feel like the reason why I am into reading memoirs or even fictional stories about very messy, traumatized girlies is because it makes me feel less alone. And when I see girlies who are going through it, or maybe don't have the best morals and things, I think it just makes them more human to me. I feel like a lot of times our culture, especially the internet, expects moral purity when it comes to people. And that's why I appreciate characters or real life people who are very upfront about their flaws and their mistakes, because that's just part of being a human being. And sometimes you really just have to go through shit in order to learn and get your shit together in the first place. There's just something so real about being a messy girly. In a way, that's truly female solidarity. Those are going to be some of the books that I'm checking out, if not for Brat Summer, then at some point in my life. If any of these books interested you, let me know. Or if you have any other books that you think would match the theme of Brat Summer, let me know in the comments. The next time I see you, I'm going to be talking about books I actually have read, because it's been a while since I've shared my reading updates recently, so I hope you'll join me next time. Until then, goodbye.